We can go live now to Washington and our worldly political procedures correspondent, Will Parker, who's there. Will, what can you tell us?
Well, Ben, what we're being told here is that the Secretary of Defense is due here behind me any minute now. We were originally told that it would be 2 o'clock, but that's now been revised outwards by another 5 minutes or so. But, of course, that all depends on when he actually appears.
Now, of course, there's been a lot of speculation about what Mr. Rumsfeld is actually going to announce today. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, Ben, I have to say that speculation here in Washington has been at least as much to do with what Mr. Rumsfeld isn't going to say as it has been about what he might or might not say when he arrives any minute now behind me.
Its authors say that the problem of obesity is currently costing the NHS £16 billion a day and could eventually lead to many of our biggest hospitals literally collapsing.
Our morbid obesity correspondent, Amanda Panda, has this report.
Walk down any street in Britain today, like this one I'm walking down now, and you're surrounded by wobbling fat.
We know, for instance, that he isn't going to say anything about what we originally thought he was going to talk about. But then again, I think we knew that already. That's just not his style.
Will, what more can you tell us about what we thought he was going to say?
Ben, that's an interesting one. What I can tell you is that Mr. Rumsfeld is very much his own man, and whatever he says when he appears behind me in just a few moments' time, it'll be exactly what he means, because, as we know, that's very much his style.
Whatever Mr. Rumsfeld does say, Will, and of course we'll know that very shortly, what more can you tell us?
Hello, I'm Dan Evans in London.
Is Madonna dead? More on that story.
Stay with us. Coming up
Shortly.
Stay tuned.
Moments ago, we thought we saw some movement through that door, which I don't think you can quite see behind me. But in fact, it turned out to be another man. What I can tell you, Ben, is that Mr. Rumsfeld is a man in no mood to mince his words, no matter what words he decides to choose to use, or indeed not use. And of course, we'll know that very shortly indeed.
And in the meantime, Will, what are people saying there as they wait for Mr. Rumsfeld to appear behind you about the possible significance of what he will have said, assuming, of course, that he has said it?
Well, Ben, that's very interesting, because if indeed he...
Tennis now.
Oh, yeah? Well, I got 2 words for
A
you.
lot of speculation, and much of it, I have to say, speculation. Not only about the form of the words that Mr. Rumsfeld will use when he appears behind me any minute now, but also about the precise order in which he may or may not use them.
And, Will, what more do we know about what you mean by that?
What we have to remind ourselves is that...
You're watching PVS News with Adam
Lockwood and Francis
Walsh.
More later.
What more do you know about what you can tell us about that, Will?
Ben, that's an interesting one. What I can tell you about what I can tell you is that one of the things people are starting to say here is that...
Different perspective.
Will, how much more do you know about what you can tell us?
Well, Ben, not much more than you...
Baker's Crisps 11 will...
Don't have to look at or listen to it anymore. But even then, simply knowing you're in the same cinema where it's on will make you want to chew off your own fish.
Real sense here that this is a man who may say almost anything at all. Now, if that is how it plays out, and of course we'll know that in a very few number of moments from now, but if it is...
It's 22 days now since the group
Of mistiness just hanging on in some sub-Saharan.
I can see movement in the corridor behind me here. I don't know if you can see it, but it looks as if... Yes, it's him. Here he is now, flanked by his aides, the United States Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld.
We return now to our earlier news of that reported incident on board a Union Air
7 passenger aircraft carrying 294 passengers and crew bound for Amsterdam from Chicago. We can go live now to our reporter, Will
Parker, who's in Amsterdam.
Will, what more can you tell us?
Well, Francis, what we're hearing here in Amsterdam is that there's been what's described as an incident on board the plane, which is a Union Air 747 with 316 passengers and crew on board. Now, precisely what kind of an incident it is isn't clear yet. We may not know that until the plane comes down in one way or another here behind me, as it's due to do in about 10 to 15 minutes' time.
Here in the studio, we're also getting reports in the last few minutes, so far unconfirmed, that the aircraft may in fact have changed course and may now be heading towards London instead of Amsterdam.
Absolutely, Francis. Yes, I'm now getting those reports too as you speak.
And, Will, without wishing to speculate, of course, what would be some of the worst-case scenarios?
We've all heard that planes are the safest form of transport.
But correspondent Will Parker in
Amsterdam. Will, I gather you've just been told that Dutch air traffic control has now lost contact with the Union Air plane.
Francis, yes, that's right. Just a few moments ago here in Amsterdam, we were told that Dutch air traffic control has now lost contact with the Union Air plane.
And Will, without wishing to speculate...
Anyway, to cut a long story short,
we can go back
now to Will Parker at Schiphol Airport. Will.
Francis, yes, the situation here at Schiphol remaining very sombre, very Dutch. What more can you tell us?
Well, we're getting reports that a woman passenger on board the plane has managed to phone her mother on her mobile phone, and that 4 men disguised as pilots may have forced their entry onto the flight deck using a wooden knife.
Francis, clearly very dramatic news. And what's the sense there in the studio of where that leaves us here on the ground in Amsterdam?
Well, that's an interesting one. If these...
About the problem of claustrophobia.
May turn out to be the sort of thing that will become clear when we hear the statement itself. But if, on the other hand, that isn't how things pan out...
Well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to come back to you. We understand that that Union Air statement at Heathrow is about to happen. Yes, there we are. There are the pictures. Let's... Those pictures live from that Union Air statement at Heathrow. Extraordinary scenes there.
Certainly are. Well, let's go straight back for a reaction now to our correspondent, Will
Parker at Schiphol. Will, what's the reaction there to what we've just heard?
Francis, yes, this is exactly the kind of conclusion to this quite extraordinary evening that no one at all has been predicting.
For reaction to extraordinary scenes here at Heathrow.
Go straight back for reaction to extraordinary scenes.
Extraordinary pictures from PVS News in London there. Anthony, it's hard to find the words right now.
Right.
Further isolation tonight. The hospital is due to release a statement about
her condition, and we can cross now live to our correspondent, Will Parker, who's in
Athens. Will, what more can you tell us?
Francis, yes, I'm here at the Asclepios Hospital in Athens, and what we're being told here tonight is that the head of the surgical team treating the 59-year-old woman at the centre of this unfolding drama, Dr. Apostolonopoulos, will come out of that door you could see behind me, down the ramp in front of it, and then make a statement to the waiting media any moment now.
And do we know what he's likely to say in that bulletin?
Well, Francis, not at this stage, no. And indeed, it may well be that we won't know what he's going to say until he's saying it.
And Will, when you say that at the moment we don't know what he's going to say, what is it exactly that we don't know?
Well, at the moment, we don't know the woman's name, and we don't know the precise details of the symptoms she's suffering from. In fact, Francis, I have to say that at this stage, we don't even know whether Dr. Apostolonopoulos is a man or indeed a woman.
And Will, in the way that these things tend to play out, is it significant that we don't know these details?
Well, Francis, that's a very good question. It may indeed be highly significant that the Greek authorities did not release those details, particularly if when we do know them, they do indeed confirm what many people here are already reading into the fact that they haven't been released. On the other hand, the fact that we don't know those details may not be significant at all, and indeed it may be precisely because...
Richard Harbinger there in central London. Richard, thank you.
Dick, thanks. And we can go back live now to Athens and to our correspondent, Will Parker, who's...
there. Will, what's the latest you can tell us?
Well, the latest here, Francis, is that we're still waiting for Dr. Apostolonopoulos, head of the surgical team treating the 59-year-old woman at the centre of this deepening crisis, to make his or her way down this ramp you can see behind me and to issue a statement.
And presumably the reason for that is that there's been a delay of some kind.
Well, I have to say that's very much the feeling here, Francis. Now, of course, delays come in many shapes and sizes, and what we don't know in this case...
We really are looking at a situation where whole swathes of the population of a country like Great Britain could simply be wiped out. The much talked about tomato time bomb.
Very much a waiting game now, Francis, although exactly what the rules of that game are, who's playing it, and where the missing pieces are, it's impossible to...
Now, as we were hearing from Richard and Katie earlier, the world is bracing itself tonight for a possible outbreak of tomato flu.
What I can tell you, Francis, is that a few moments ago a woman wearing glasses went in through that door you could just see behind me. But so far she hasn't come back out. Now, who that woman was, where she was going, or why she was wearing glasses, we just can't say at this...
8205, Tesco Flyander, looking OK.
Unanswered as the seconds tick away here behind me.
Without wishing to speculate, of course, Will, what's your sense of what some people are saying there in Athens tonight about what could be unfolding in that hospital?
Well, of course, the Greeks are a pretty phlegmatic lot at times like this, Francis. I spoke to one old man earlier in a cafe who didn't even bother to reply.
Up there in Cumbria.
And indeed, it's never over until the fat lady sings. But of course, in this case, We still don't know whether Dr. Apostolopoulos is indeed a lady, and if she is a lady, whether or not she is fat. I certainly think it's unlikely she's going to sing.
But at just 9 years old, David McIntosh could become Britain's youngest ever mum. In a statement...
Yes, indeed, Francis, there is indeed something happening here. Yes, this looks very much like the announcement we've been promised. This is it, I think. Here he comes now, just coming, as you can see, out onto the ramp here behind me here. So at least we now know that he is a he. So this then, at last, is Dr. Apostolopoulos.
Now we seem to have lost Will Parker there in Athens for the moment. Yes, we have lost him. Obviously, we'll go back to Athens as soon as we can.